wait for the jingle to say hello. Hello, everybody. Hello, ChangeNOW. Bonjour, Paris. How are you today? Enjoying the conference? It's just the best, isn't it? So this is going to be a very special session. Let me just introduce myself. My name is Sophie Bidwell. I'm a director of Springwise. You probably have heard about Springwise already, so I won't explain what it is again, but go and check it out. You won't be disappointed. It's a little bit like ChangeNOW on a daily basis. And I have been lucky enough to participate in these ChangeNOW events since they were set up. I love this conference. This is my favorite moment of the year. And every time I participate in a ChangeNOW event, two things happen. The first one is I get this extraordinary influx of positive energy, which I am sure you are feeling right now and will take back home. And this, I surf on this for about 6 months to 12 months afterwards until I need another fix, and then the next ChangeNOW conference happens. The second thing that happens is that I get this light bulb moments. So moments where my perception, where my point of view fundamentally changes and it pushes me to do something different. And I would like to believe that the session we're about to have might be one of those light bulb moments for you. So what we're going to do, and Santiago talked about narrative changes this morning, and in this session, hopefully we're going to achieve a narrative change about an element that we think we know very well, which is carbon. Carbon is probably one of the most used words in these conferences in the next few days. Yet, do we really, really know it and understand it? So we're going to deep dive into carbon and see how we can change the narrative around carbon, why it's important, and move it from being the problem to being the solution. So that's our goal over the next hour. And to get us started, we are going to watch a clip from the documentary without which this session wouldn't exist. So Daniella Ortega, who we are going to speak to in a few minutes, has written this documentary about carbon called Carbon, the Unauthorized Biography. So I'm going to let you discover that, and then we will have a conversation with Daniella. And then just to let you know what happens after that, we will move from the philosophical and the emotional into the practical, and I will then have panel conversations with people who are living this change around the narrative of carbon every day and who have solutions around it. So here we go. Let's watch Carbon, the Unauthorized Biography, a clip from Daniella Ortega. Thank you.
I wonder, who will he become? What will be the story of his life? His is yet to be written, but mine is like a book that never ends. Yet I am a part of him, building him cell by cell, right here, right now. I am invisible to you, but if you look closer, you'll find me. See? You call me an atom, an element, a fundamental building block of life. You name me carbon. But would you believe me if I said that before I arrived here, I was here? I was caught by the wind, flung down and buried under the earth. I was breathed in by a falcon and expelled. I was burned in the belly of machine. That's me, again, right there, coming out of the tailpipe. True story. This perfectly formed child is partly built of pollution, of waste. You think you know me, but do you?
The levels of carbon pollution in our atmosphere have increased dramatically.
Daily choice is to reduce their carbon footprint.
We'll abolish the carbon tax.
Global carbon emissions are tipped to hit a record high this year.
Of yet another war over carbon.
People are saying we have a carbon problem. What is your carbon footprint? What is your carbon tax? And I'm thinking, don't blame carbon. It's not carbon's fault.
Carbon is profoundly important in the universe. She is what makes us possible.
We are nature because we are made of carbon. So is everything else.
Every one of us lives in a carbon world. We have to learn to get along with carbon.
Nothing is more urgent to the survival of human civilization as we know it than understanding carbon and where she likes to hide.
I am the most talked about, but least understood element on Earth. If you are to survive me, you must understand me.
So here you go. I highly recommend that you go and watch the full documentary. I did this with my whole family. It was a seminal moment, so please go and look out for it and watch it. Daniella, I can see, is online. Daniella, I am going to introduce you very briefly, and then I'm going to let you talk about your wonderful documentary. Daniella is an award-winning documentary filmmaker. She's joining us from Australia, where it must be very late. So thank you for that, Daniella. You focus on high-end documentaries, and you have covered topics ranging from archaeological discovery to colonial violence, all the way to the intricacies of the teenage brain. So very warm welcome for Daniella Ortega, please. I hope you can hear the clapping.
I can, thank you.
How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. It's a little bit disconcerting being able to hear my echo, but if anybody can do something about that, that would be great. But I'm fine, I feel good. Thank you, and I wish I was there. It looks like an amazing conference, and you're all so lucky to be there in person.
We are indeed. So, Daniella, we don't have a lot of time, so let's get into it. So, could you just bring us back to the genesis of this project for you, and maybe to the research phase? So, surely you have researched your character in depth for this documentary. Maybe what was that like, and what surprised you the most about your character as you researched it?
Well, I think that, like most people, I thought I knew carbon. I thought that I understood carbon. I had, thought I had a pretty good understanding of carbon. But when I started researching the documentary, and the reason I wanted to make the documentary was because, like Neil says in that clip, so much noise, so much negative noise about carbon this, carbon credits, carbon tax, and I really wanted to understand carbon better for myself, but also to explain it to my kids, to my family. Like, what is it about this element, this carbon, that has this power to disrupt and to be on the news every day? Why? And so I started to do the research, and then what surprised me, to answer your question, what surprised me when I learned more about carbon was that, we hear this cliche that everything is connected. You hear that everything is connected. But when I researched the film, I actually understood that is 100% true. It's chemically true that carbon is the thing that actually does connect everything. And so that was actually quite profound for me. You know, to understand that carbon is not the enemy. Carbon is us. Carbon is life. Carbon is pretty much everything around us. Everything that surrounds you right now in that room. It's all because of carbon. So that was quite a profound and sort of fundamental thing that I learned that I really wanted other people to understand. Because I think that if you really want to understand the planet, climate, our futures, and everything, and our past actually as well, you really need to understand the story of carbon.
And did it
I think that's the fundamental thing that surprised me.
Did it surprise you that maybe other people didn't understand carbon, i.e. it's a sort of widespread, complete misunderstanding or misknowledge about one of the most fundamental elements on the planet?
I did, because, you know, like I said, I thought that I understood carbon, but there wasn't really a real deep understanding of carbon. And I think for most people, we're kind of in that same state. And certainly for politicians and for, you know, people who run businesses and people who have a big impact and influence on carbon's story and carbon's journeys through the world, I don't think would necessarily have this deep, foundational kind of understanding of carbon. So that was my intention, to help us understand carbon better.
And for those who haven't watched the movie, it's very graphical, and you can see carbon as this element, and it's pink, and it floats all around us, and it moves from a star to being us, to becoming something else. And it, as Daniella says, it really makes profoundly, gives you the feeling that we are all connected through this one element, which, if I've understood the documentary correctly, is 90% of all we see is carbon. And yet we target it as the enemy, which is what we're trying to talk about today. And Daniella, I know you get asked this question a lot, but you made your character carbon, and then you made your character a female character. Why is that?
I think this was possibly the most controversial element of the most controversial aspect of the film, in that I made carbon a personified carbon. I gave carbon a voice. But I think I should explain why I did that. You know, it's hard to get connected to something that you can't see, you can't hear, is mostly invisible. It's all around us, yet it's invisible. And so I was really trying in this film to find a way to make us connect with carbon in a way that we hadn't before. And not only intellectually, like to understand carbon, but actually to kind of have some sort of relationship with carbon. It sounds very strange when I try to talk about it like this, but I do feel like we need to understand carbon better and to relate to carbon. So I made carbon a person, and I made carbon have a voice and to have words to say and to have opinions and thoughts and feelings. And in that way, I can actually make a biography of carbon. That's the biography of carbon, the life story. To understand the birth of carbon, the carbon's formative experiences in shaping our world, what carbon thinks about what's happened to our planet over the last few hundred years, couple of hundred years, and now. So that's why I made carbon a person, to kind of connect the head, our heads and our hearts in some way to this element.
And why is it
why I made carbon a woman?
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that I went one step further, with making carbon female, which was unconventional, surprising. In many ways, people ask me, it's like, why isn't carbon male? You think about carbon should be male because it's this big black, element. Carbon's a builder. Carbon's strong. Carbon should be male. But when you start to think about the role of carbon in building planets, in building life, in building our kids, building our families, building our civilizations, you really start to see carbon as a enabler or a creator or even a mother of sorts. And when you start to have those ideas, at least I could not disconnect that with a female being, And I have to admit, I guess it's my voice. I gave carbon my words, and I'm me, and I'm a mum. So I channeled myself, I channeled myself into carbon too, because that's what, as a filmmaker, I can do that. I have license to do that.
That's great. Well, I'm not going to argue with your choice on this one. And Daniella, you used the word unauthorized in the title. Why is that? Were there some barriers? Maybe some people don't want us to understand carbon for what it is? Why use this word?
I think the thing about an unauthorized biography is, technically what that means is that the biography has not, the permission of the protagonist has not been given to the filmmaker. So when you have an unauthorized biography, it's not been given, the consent of the protagonist has not been given. In this case, Carbon hasn't given us consent, to tell this story. And in some ways, what I was trying to do there, it's a bit cheeky, but what I was trying to do was emphasize that it's really not Carbon who has, impacted the world in this destructive way through Carbon's own willingness. It's actually what we have done to Carbon. What we have steered the story. We have had the impact, the influence, not Carbon herself. And then I guess that's the unauthorized part of the biography. It's again my artistic kind of license, but yeah, it also is an intriguing title. Makes people go,
it's a great title.
What is that?
It does the
I
job
want to know what that is.
very well.
What's that about? And yeah.
And so you launched this documentary a few years ago. What happened then? What was the reaction that you got, and did the reaction surprise you?
Well, actually, it's only released last year.
Okay.
So it was released in France and various. It's still being screened in, I think it's 21 countries so far. So it was only released about less than 12 months ago, roughly, a bit longer than 12 months ago, and has done many festivals, and won many awards. It's been a really great reception. I feel like. The only disappointment I have to say is that it was not picked up as a sale in the United States, because my film is quite an unconventional science film. It's very unorthodox, and for quite conservative broadcasters, think that it's not for them. But luckily, and that's been the case in the United States, which is really quite disappointing. But in France was one of the commissioners that first took on the film, which was fabulous, and many other, all across Latin America and many other countries, it's been screened, and it's been a really great reception. Yeah.
So we're in the Cannes season, and so obviously it's a topical moment for movies. Do you think movies have a role to play in our fight that we're all here to fight today?
I mean, I have to believe that because I'm a movie maker, right? That's what I do. That's my fundamental belief, is that it's the role of artists and filmmakers, especially, to tell these sorts of stories in new and interesting ways, in innovative ways that kind of shake up our thinking and the narratives that we're stuck in. And I do feel like we need more of that. I really do. And I hope that this film, inspires other filmmakers to also think about the climate crisis and many, many aspects of the climate solutions as well in interesting ways. There's a lot of saturation in out there in what we can watch. So to do something that's surprising, unconventional, innovative, I think is really, really important. Otherwise people they just don't watch. Yeah. So yeah, it's a challenge.
And let's just get practical, Daniella. So the main message of the movie is that one needs to change their relationship with carbon. What does that mean in practice? What does that mean for individuals, and what does that mean for corporates and people who have a different type of voice?
So in my film, it's a very intimate, personal, emotional film about a relationship. And so what I was trying to say what I was trying to imbue on the audience watching the film is that every time we talk about changing our relationship with carbon, what that actually means is we're building a bridge toward the places that we love and the people that we cherish in our lives. So we need to remember that to preserve, we talk about, you know, preserving biodiversity and all of those things, and that's fundamentally important. But what that means on an individual, personal level is that to preserve the places and the people that we love, actually. So it was to carry that in our hearts every day, you know, to remember and to reflect on that, and to think about your connections with carbon and how your life intersects with carbon in your daily actions and your reactions, and how you want to preserve the places and the people that you love. So that's I know it might sound a bit fuzzy, but it's actually quite a deep effect. I was looking at something quite, it's deep. So yeah, that is actually in practice. That's something you can actually practice every day. Remember that. Remember how you interact with carbon and why you want to change your relationship with carbon. And then, of course, how that translates to, on a bigger level, is to think about, you know, who are your political leaders and who are your business leaders around within your sphere that also get the carbon story and get what it means to change our relationship with carbon in this deeper, more profound way, not a superficial way, and to support them.
Yes.
And to make connections with them. So that's what that means. I mean, on a corporate level, you can extend that too. You know, in every sector, corporate leaders can reflect and look hard in their own carbon story of their organization, and, you know, think about extending the ideas of the film, how to respect the cycle of carbon, what can we do to reduce our level of harm and negative impact on the planet, and how can we make your organization, you know, have a healthy relationship with carbon. It's still the same, it's just extended on a different scale. Yeah, so that's what the film's trying to do.
Thank you, Daniella. So I'm afraid we're out of time, so we're going to have to leave you, and you're probably tired and need some rest. But I really encourage the audience to watch this documentary. What Daniella is describing will happen. You will reconsider your relationship with carbon. And we have talked today about the importance of the arts to convey messages, to make things happen. And thank you, Daniella, for making such a great documentary, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sophie. Thank you so much.